Hi everyone, delonewolf here and welcome back to EVE Talk, your weekly look at the market in EVE Online. And well, we got a new trailer for EVE Online. That was very cool. For the Minmatar Republic, I thought it was a very nice video. Loved the atmosphere there, and I think Minmatar players will feel very proud with their choice once they see that trailer. I personally also can't wait for the Amar one, to see the other side of that war. That could be very interesting to see what their motivations are and how CCP is going to handle that one. For other development news, we don't have a lot, but of course the trailer was dropped because we are starting the Minmatar celebrations. So I myself have a jump clone in Rennes, and at the moment that's really what I'm doing a little bit, flying around to all of those fleets and launching some fireworks at the Titan. That gets you some free skill points, and then I actually moved the venture back into into Minmatar space as well. So once things settle down a little bit, at first there's always this gold rush that people experience. I'm probably going to try and do some of these expeditions once again, and just take part of these Minmatar liberation games that are happening at the moment. Next up, let's take a quick look at the New Eden store, see what's happening over there. Couple of bundles, front and center. Freedom's Revolution skins are marked as hot and new for a lot of the Minmatar skins. They are pretty cool in my opinion. Indeed, they have this holographic star shape. Is it 7? Let's take a quick look and see if it is 7 arms or legs. Yeah, look at that, it's definitely so 6 and then 1 like this, that represents 7 tribes of the Minmatar. Very cool. A couple of bundles, we are not spotting any sales. What about the services? That all looks pretty normal as well. So next up, let's take a look at the market. As always, we start with plex and stuff, and that is actually coming in at 2 minutes 20. Like that, and you may already have seen it on the ticker, but yeah, plex continuing its ascent, at least here in Jita. The sellers are above 2.8 million, buyers are just below 2.7 million, so the margin stays pretty much the same for buyers. It doesn't change in the Tranquility Trading Tower, and then the sellers go to just below 2.8 million in the Perimeter Tranquility Trading Tower. On the chart we should see a nice increase in price, actually almost matching the 1 year high average, you could say, of around 2.7 million ISK. That's definitely a very sharp increase over the last 1, 2, 3.5 months or something like that, going up from 2.2 to 2.7 million almost on the chart. Very big move, I would say, and definitely something that you could have traded on if you had the courage to stock up on plex right here at the 2.2 million bottom, or let's say definitely below 2.4 million. Could have been places where you could have started to do your trading. Definitely on this one here as well, a second dip down at 2.3 million. You're looking at a decent run up in the price here. Where we go from here, that is going to be very interesting. I've been mentioning this in the last couple of EVE talks as well. CCP still has plans normally for the keys for those bank reserves that should bring in a lot of ISK potentially, and thus a lot more inflationary pressure as well. But for now, plex definitely increasing in price and back at the 2.7 million, becoming expensive once again. Looking at this 1 year chart, definitely breaking through the average, I would say, of 2.5 million for the year without too much effort or resistance. For the skill extractors, we are seeing a similar actually increase velocity, I would say, of the increase in price here as well. This is very sharp in the last week or so, and we're also playing with this high average that we had October, November and December of last year. We're talking 313.5 million ISK for the sellers and above 300 million ISK for the buyers as well. Volumes are down. Let's take a quick look at plex as well. Volumes are definitely down a little bit here as well. So there's a bit of you know, some buyers that are definitely going out of the market at these current prices. But you know, super nice recovery here as well. Let's say that you bought at the best possible time. You probably could have bought well below 260 million ISK. You're looking at sell price of 313. That should be a nice bit of profit potentially, but where we go from here, that's the real question, of course. Then we have the impact on the injectors. I'm really curious. We should finally see a real impact on this, in my opinion, but who knows. Even with the Liberation Day, we still have quite a bit of skill points that are being given out just for logging in every day and taking part of some small and easy activities. We do at least see that the bleeding is stopping. We are stopping our descent. We went down to 570 million ISK, forming a bottom a little bit above that, and then today's average is definitely up a little bit. So this could be the turnaround, and that is going to be the real question. Do you think that eventually this full plex recovery will also cause prices for large-scale injectors to increase once again? Then this could still be a very interesting time to buy, although you're probably again just too late, as we've started to stop the decrease in price, started to increase in price as well here on the 5-day moving average right at the tail end. Not sure if you guys are going to be able to spot that, but it's definitely starting to pull up here. That usually makes it a very bad time to try to pick some of these injectors from the buyers, because that's where you know, no one is really willing to dump anymore. 600 million ISK for the sellers, 568 million for the buyers. Still a very big margin. I do think if you're aggressive with your buy price, so if you go up like 10 million or something like that, you can still trigger it. But yeah, expecting that 568, which would be very close to that, or just below that 570 million, which would on this chart I think be a dream, is going to be very, very difficult. But a little bit above that, maybe like a 575 or something like that, could still be possible. And that is of course your decision to make. Is this the time to jump into the large scale injectors? Well, Plex says yes, but of course CCP is still very generous with skill points, which is a big part of the calculation, I would say, that the market makes for these injectors. But that lag here that we're seeing, Plex rising for a couple of months, and only now we are seeing the bottom start to form for the skill injectors, definitely makes for an interesting situation with, in my opinion, a lot of upwards potential. Of course, the market is always unpredictable. I would say that volumes have only started to drop off here a little bit as well in the last week or so. Another sign that perhaps, you know, we are starting to see upwards pressure on the price. Small scale injectors are, well, showing the hesitation, and to my very surprise, again moving slightly differently from the large scale injectors, despite just being basically a number of small scale injectors form a large scale injector. But you can see that we have basically a little bit of a faster recovery in the price happening after we made a bottom, a bit more of a sharper move, and then at the tail end here we're seeing hesitation with the 5-day moving average coming back together with the 20-day moving average, and doing so at a current price of 118 million for the sellers, 111 million for the buyers. So a narrower margin, I would say. And definitely a little bit more hesitation in the market. On this chart, it is probably likely that you can buy a small scale injector for close to 110 or 111 million ISK at the moment, because there is that little bit of pressure that is going to potentially make it easier for someone to decide it's only like a 9 million, no, not even that, a 7 million margin between sellers and buyers. I'm just going to sell to that first buyer that goes up by maybe even 500,000 ISK or something like that. So that's again a very different situation. If I were a betting man, I would try to snag a couple of cheap small skill injectors on this one. Then we've got our daily alpha injectors that are stopping the bleeding as well. That 40 million does seem to be a price range that the market is not really willing to let go of. You can see that we're bouncing from 37.5 right back to that 40 million, where 5-day moving average, 20-day moving average, and the daily averages of the last couple of days are meeting nicely. So that could mean lower margins. Yeah, 40.2 million for the sellers, 36 million for the first buyer. Those are slowly coming together, and the 40 million, the sellers are dominating the price, which to me again makes a lot of sense. 40 million, very nice goal for an alpha player to set himself. It is doable with a little bit of luck in just a single day, maybe even a couple of exploration drops or something like that. Or grind wise, I would say that it is also still doable, running missions, doing other stuff. And so this seems to be something that has found that 40 million price range on average, and yeah, on a little bit of lack of supply it probably goes up in price. On maybe a little bit of extra demand as well, some new trials and things like that, and then on quieter periods, well, which is, it is summertime, we will potentially see buyers go a little bit lower and thus get those average prices from time to time that are below 40 million. Is very, very interesting item in my opinion as well, although at the moment I would not be looking to actively trade it, since in my opinion we're right on the money of that 40 million that the market seems to love. Then we've got the hypercores left that are, well, again, bouncing away from the 280 mark. So we had a very sharp increase up to 300,000 disk, bit of a pullback to 280. But now the upwards pressure showing, in my opinion, a little bit of market expectation for inflation to take over here again. And we are currently at, well, a little bit of lack of supply, although here 3,000 and 1,000 of them should give us a little bit of room, or not. Well, actually, yeah. No, 100,000 a day. Yeah, this is interesting. Did we run out again or something? 295,000 for the sellers, 271,000 for the buyers. A little bit of upwards pressure. Definitely, if you're looking at this one, an April bottom. Let's see what that price on average would have been. 240,000, and now you're selling for almost 300,000 disk. Also surprisingly tradable for something that is really tiny, right? Investment wise, this is very small. So again, if plex is like too big for you, then maybe hypercores could become an option as well to look at from that trading perspective. Next up, we are moving on to the minerals, coming in at 12 minutes. Like that, and let's take a look at this here. We've got titanium still basically sideways around 4.5 ISK. We are definitely seeing a little bit of pressure. If you look at the ticker here, 455 for the first seller, 456 for the next one, so that's definitely the price, and then 430 for the buyers. Very narrow margin between sellers and buyers, and yeah, that 4.5 does seem to be the current average price that titanium is making. Volume wise, pretty normal, I would say. 100 million, 200 million is definitely doable for the more active sellers. It's also, you know, the most common mineral. You get most of that out of a single piece of feldspar, and also as a side product of others. So these are actually pretty normal, and yeah, this is the consequence of the lowered need of titanium in industry in general. So we have this new average price that seems to be 4.5 ISK. Anything above that, in my opinion, right, once we get towards 5 ISK and above, no brain cell place for titanium. Once you get below 4.5 ISK to closer to 4, that's where you may consider holding off. Let's take a look at the others though. Here is pyrite moving back towards 20 ISK. All right, we're talking 19 for one seller, but getting to 1974, 75 very quickly for the next one, and 20 is coming into view on the front page. 17 ISK for the buyer, still a little bit of margin here between sellers and buyers, but a slight upwards pressure, which is very nice. If we look at this full chart, then that may be the first sign of at least a little bit of recovery in industry as well, which is what I would have honestly expected. So this whole bubble here was the rush on industry when, you know, the changes were announced and everyone was just like, all right, battleships, that much more stuff, more complex, same with capitals, etc. We're just gonna make as many of them as we can before these changes hit, and that was naturally going to cause a little bit of a depression afterwards. But then the question was, well, is summertime just going to mean that we're going to continue to go down or start to flatten out? Is this the current output we can expect, or do we see a little bit of a resurgence? And at least in Pyrite here, I'm seeing this as a little bit of a resurgence. It would be very nice if we can get back above 20 ISK. Not really sure if we can, but if we look at the months before the announcement, right, just below and at around 20 ISK was definitely a price that the market seemed happy at, even in the previous industry situation. So if we can get back there, to me that does mean that demand is not completely gone from the game, and that slowly industry will start to pick up in activity and show increased demand for minerals. Then we've got Mexalon, where we have the same thing, but no sign of a recovery just yet. So this again, for me, is not that big of a surprise. The exact price ranges were never really known, of course, but you have again the April bubble going up to 200 ISK for Mexalon. My reference point is 75 historical normal average, and so you can see we're below that and still going down a little bit. Selling at the moment for 61 to 62 ISK for most, 55 ISK for the buyers. That's still a pretty healthy margin as well, and clearly downwards pressure. And so here the question is, will we eventually, just like with Pyrite, potentially see that pull up as well in Mexalon, as which would be a sign that industry is picking back up, as eventually we should also get through this the stockpiles that have been created here. Now, it could take a very long time during summertime, but perhaps eventually we will see that. That's what I'm personally looking at to gauge what's happening in EVE Online. Then we've got Isogen climbing above 60 ISK and able to defend that for the last week or so. 62 for the sellers, 61 almost for the buyers, showing that upwards pressure. But the story here, as I've been saying for months and months and months, in my opinion, is of course different from like a resurgence in industry or something like that. It's really unique to Isogen, where we are finally starting to get through the old stocks. Now they're still there, right? 253 million ISK at 63 is still waiting to be absorbed by the market, but it's no longer 2 billion ISK. And look at below that, far more reasonable in volumes. We still have 10 million here, 10 million there, but those sellers, I think, have started to maybe also feel like, yeah, all right, we're starting to actually run a little bit lower on Isogen. Let's be a little bit patient, spread it out a little bit more, and try to sell more slowly, as it generally means that I can sell at a higher price. And so this is now slowly starting to materialize, and I will be honest, my expectation is, if we're looking at the average volumes for Mexalon, right, we've got a couple 6 million, 30 million, 13 million here, but most regular sellers, I would say, are hovering at around a 1 million units volume. And I would personally expect that eventually the normal sell order for Isogen goes below that 1 million. And then I would say here, maybe these for like 3-4 days ago, these are potentially what I would be looking at as just dominating the sell volumes. 500,000, 600,000 ISK, and then a couple of smaller ones, 67,000, 50,000 units. And if that becomes dominant and we lose all of these that I'm still reading as old stock, 10 million volumes, 5 million volumes, even way too close to what Mexalon is doing, then that should put way more upwards pressure for Isogen, and should give Isogen the opportunity to take over and become more expensive than Mexalon. It's getting very close to that, right? 61, 62 for the sellers, and here we're talking 62 for the sellers. We're right in that process. I personally expect that the momentum is there and that we will eventually see that happen, and then of course, yeah, Isogen will take its place amongst the hardest to get, most risky minerals in the game, because you have to get them in low sec, and then the comparison will become a lot stronger to Noxium, which at the moment is confirming the lack of demand and the lack of activity and the continued decline in price that we're seeing here. But look at where we come from, 2000 ISK for Noxium. Now I'm not exactly 100% sure, but must be very close to an all-time high for Noxium, losing 50% of its value. We're starting to play with 1,000 disc at this point, at least for the buyers, 1130 for the sellers and 1,044 for the buyers. But this is still a very, very high price for Noxium, even historically speaking, and especially in the current context where it is the most expensive Tech 1 mineral. And that is what we would expect for low sec minerals, because it is the most risky activity to go after substantial amounts of Noxium. And then again, we'll take a quick look at the volumes. So we get a couple of at 1 million, 2 million. Those do still happen, right? Eventually you get groups that are becoming more efficient at this. But again here, 800,000, 150,000, 650,000, and then down here 200,000, 200,000, couple of really small sell orders. These are what is dominating the sell orders. Most, I would say, below 500,000 disc, and quite a few. You know, if we would take all of those that are below 1 million, make the average of that, I'm pretty sure that we're well below 500,000. I would say for Isogen, you can expect something between 500,000 and 1 million to become that average, but that logic should eventually, as we get through stocks, should start to dominate, and then we will, in my opinion, see a more logical move as well, where Noxium is going down because of lower demand. Well, Isogen should be doing the same thing, showing that this is truly a unique situation. And Pyrite, apparently the first one to make a little bit of a counter move as well. We will see. I would say that high sec is the easiest to bring to market, and may thus be the most reactive to like increased demand and things like that. So we'll see how it all evolves, but it's very interesting. If we then take a look at the nosec minerals, here is Zydrine, very flat at its current range, but again well below 1,000 disc, well below the price of Noxium, 840 to 45 disc for the sellers, above 800 disc for the buyers. And here again, if you take a quick look at the volumes, you of course have some bigger groups that can manage millions of volumes as well. With that extra bit of uniqueness, I would say, is that of course all of this has to be imported from nullsec, and nullsec has well-established routes of transportation with jump freighters and all of that stuff, which allows them to be a bit more patient basically, and then move in bigger bulk, which is always going to be a little bit harder, I would say, for low sec minerals as well. And this is why you know, you don't see like most sell orders of Zydrine below 100,000 disc or something like that. So that progression does stop because, well, nullsec is more populated, more organized, generally speaking, than lowsec. There's clearly some exceptions, some super organized groups in lowsec as well, but just the sheer amount of players, I think, will allow them to bring up more volumes to the market, which is why the price of Zydrine, which historically was way more expensive than Noxium, or at least competing very closely to that, and is now below that. And Megasite, which used to be the most expensive Tech 1 mineral, is still hovering at around that 600 ISK price range, 627 for the sellers and 553 for the buyers. Actually very big margin here between sellers and buyers, and then a little bit of volatility, showing that maybe there's even slightly oversupply situations from time to time in Megasite, despite the fact that the volumes here are pretty damn low on individual sell orders. Perhaps a sign that Megasite is a little bit underutilized at the moment in the general industry as well. Finally, we take a quick look at Morphite, that is continuing to make new highs, probably, I'm going to say, due to Tech 2 industry demand, maybe even a little bit of speculative bubble on that one. When CCP announced the first set of industry changes, they said that, well, this is going to be a first step in a process. We're going to look at a lot of other things, and Tech 2 is probably on the menu on that as well. So maybe there's a little bit of rush as well to make as much Tech 2 stuff as possible, because of course if CCP decides to make that harder as well, which I saw a very interesting video describing what's happening here as a stagflationary situation where prices of goods are going up and income is actually going down, making it a very depressing time for a lot of players to play EVE Online, which for instance is definitely the case in the video that I did on the faction ships, right, where faction cruisers and battleships have gone up a lot in price, and in fact it's been such a disruption that making them is super expensive, and so at the moment that market is probably being dominated by those few players that have made a character that has the reputation with, for instance, the pirate faction ships or active in faction warfare. And when your other opportunities go down in EVE Online, it's harder to make stuff, it's harder to find stuff. Even building faction ships now is not economically viable for a lot of them. Frigates are still an exception. Then what you get is, of course, a situation where you could potentially shrink that market by quite a lot. But that's also one of the stated goals, of course. They don't want EVE Online to be dominated by capitals. They don't want ships to be just at least up and above cruiser. They don't want those to just be throwaway ships anymore. That should all matter. But that's a very difficult shift in paradigm, in thinking in EVE Online that can be very hard for a lot of players. But yeah, a little bit of speculation perhaps on Tech 2 changes, meaning that Morfight is touching 100,000 disc on the chart, 99,000 and above for the sellers, 95,000 for the buyers, forced up as well. Very expensive mineral at the moment. Next up, the PI market coming in at 25.25. There we go. So with all of that, I honestly would expect more pressure in PI because of a lack of demand. I don't see ISK flowing into that market. And then the real question is, of course, will advanced PI be able to hold on? And here for broadcast nodes, so far it is able to hold on very nicely, very stable. 1.7 million for the sellers, almost 1.6 million for the buyers. And so this is also industry change. You need a little bit more of these advanced PI materials just to build like capital ships and things like that. And that seems to have been able to stabilize or increase demand enough and in a stable way, which is very good news. But then if we go to the construction blocks, well, we make our way back to 7,000 disc, but that's just crawling out of the hole, out of the 1 year low point of 6,000 disc, and is historically speaking still a very low price. 7,400 to 500 for most sellers, 6,600 for the buyers, clearly showing a lack of demand. Consumer electronics, same thing. You know, this looks positive, but yeah, if you look at this full 1 year chart, we're just again pulling away from a 1 year low point. 6.7 million for the sellers, 6.7 thousand is for the first seller, 6.2 thousand for the buyers. Our coolants, so Titan fuels, are doing a little bit better, but still just above 8,000 disc and very sideways. 8,500 for the sellers, 7,500 for the buyers. And yeah, historically speaking, 10,500 is my price that I remember for coolants. I remember it pretty damn well because I've almost always been producing coolants for exactly this reason. Fuel blocks are constantly consumed in a lot of processes in EVE Online, and that should mean more stable demand, and that is probably why coolants is able to defend an 8,000 ISK price range, whereas construction blocks and consumer electronics play with low points of 6 and even 5,000 ISK. Cryoprotectant solutions continuing its slow slide. Again, if you're seeing these peaks in the first half of the chart, then it's tied to implants, which you know, you can gamble on. Eventually, I do think that ZZP is going to introduce new implants as well. If you want to be ready for that, slowly buying cryoprotectant solutions in this market, in my opinion, makes a lot of sense. You're buying well below 100,000 disc, and looking at the previous results, that should be a good jumping point. Enriched uranium tied to fuels, again a little bit better, 10,000 disc. Now enriched uranium is way harder to make than coolants or mechanical parts, and as a result my historical perspective for a normal price is actually 12,500 disc, and so we're still below that, but at 10,300 for the sellers and almost 10,000 for the buyers, it is definitely again better than the non-fuel related PI materials. Integrity response drones, a little bit of pressure getting back to 1.5 million. Sellers are above that, buyers are above that as well. Again, in my opinion, showing that a little bit more demand for advanced PI material has been brought into the game, but the general pressure as well is clearly showing up as well. Then we get mechanical parts that is not doing that well. So if you're looking for PI stuff to make tied to fuels, well, you could probably switch to coolants and to enriched uranium if you can. Mechanical parts way more volatile and playing with low points. 7,500 for the sellers, 6,200 for the buyers. Clearly struggling. Then we've got nanites staying below 5,000 ISK, 5,300 for the sellers, but 4,650 for the buyers. Same story. I do think if you want an investment that also is tied to potentially other stuff like big fights and things like that, can have a big impact on the nanites market as well because of this nanite repair paste. And then I think that events can be very impactful here as well, because it's quite often used in some of those boosters for like skill points and things like that, faster training. So nanites is clearly, in my opinion, also one that, you know, if you can buy low, which at the moment, let's see where those buyers are at, 4,650, you know, slowly buying some of that to be ready for, well, in this case, it's potentially implants, big fights that, you know, drag on, I would say. Then you can see quite a bit of nanite or paste activity, and then of course like an event that would bring some of these boosters. All of these are opportunities where having cheap nanites can yield you a profit. Nano factories, you know, staying above 750, is that correct? 780 for the sellers, 740 for the first buyer. I think the difference here is that this is also a little bit easier to make, and that you don't necessarily need a lot of nano factories in like capital ship production. So this one, not like to 1.5 million or anything like that, but from the 1 year perspective at the start of last year, this is still definitely a decent price. Organic motor applicators, more signs of pressure, I would say. 770,000 for the sellers, but 700,000 for the buyers. Yeah, especially the cheaper ones that, again, I think are not needed to like build a carrier, for instance, that these will suffer the pressure first. Recursive computing modules, let's take a quick look at that. Going below 1 million all of a sudden as well on average. Just above that for the sellers, 920,000 for the buyers. Same pressure. Then we've got our robotics tied to fuels, yeah, specialized PI material. So a little bit different from coolants, also a little bit harder to make. And definitely not doing great. My historical perspective reference point is 100,000 discs. We're selling below 60, 59 for the sellers, 56,000 for the buyers. Clearly struggling as well to find enough demand. Self-harmonizing power cores showing that first bit of bad news, I would say, in advanced PI materials as well, as the chart goes through the 1.5 million mark. Still just above that for the sellers and just below that for the buyers, but that pressure is clearly mounting. Sterile conduits staying above 1 million. Let's take a look here. 1.1 for the sellers, almost 1 million for the buyers. Yukomi superconductors, misclick there, again tied to implants with these two spikes here. And look at that, couple of data points starting to hit 60k. 68,000 for the sellers and below that for the buyers. This is definitely also, I mean, I dreamt at the very beginning of having some of these materials added to PI that were tied to implants. I was kind of hoping to be able to pick this up below 50,000, but I think below 60,000 is already a very good, if you look at this full 1 year chart, is already a very nice jumping point, and potentially again slowly building up some Yukomi superconductor reserves in case of an implant introduction would be very nice, I think. And then with mainframes, a little bit of a bounce off of 1.5 million, 1.6 for the sellers, 1.43 for the buyers. So again, a little bit of lack of demand pressure, but some of them I think are getting snagged up by potential producers of bigger ships. Next up, advanced movements, but first a little bit of drinking. There we go. Advanced movements at 33, let's say 30. let's go. As always, we'll start with the carbide. So here is crystalline carbonate, which last week was doing a very strong pullback down to 175. Still a great price, a high price. And this is a little bit of a surprise. I thought we would have enough momentum to keep going or to maybe start to move sideways at our current premium. But no, look at that. Violent upswing up to 225, back close to a 1-year high point. 245 for the sellers, 202 ISK for the buyers. So volatility here is still not done. And this could be another sign that my read on what's happening in Morphite may be correct. A little bit of a rush, a little bit of extra pressure to do Tech 2 production at the moment, expecting that CCP may throw a wrench in that one as well. You know, a lot of Tech 1 production has become a lot more complex and more expensive. And so whatever you can make now, you know, if that's what CCP is planning to do, can become very profitable. But I would say that at this point it's clearly still gambling. Next up we've got the Caldari one, which is down here. Titanium carbide also had a very strong pullback to 200 ISK, which is still very nice premium from the start of the year, but here it is, a bounce back up as well. 255 and getting to 260, 270, 280, up to 317 on the front page very quickly, and buyers forced up well above 200 at 217 ISK as well. So another show of violence. The bottoms do go lower and lower slowly, but we do see a lot of volatility in these carbide materials, which in my opinion is again signs that there's buyers waiting for any opportunity to buy cheaper, and then the volumes do come in, driving the price back up substantially. For Minmatar, we've got Fernite carbide that's also doing a little bit of an upswing, but not as sharply as the Galente one, which has been the most sharp so far. 174 for the sellers, 161 for the buyers. Back in the normal trade range, you could say, for the whole year here. So this one, yeah, I think it's actually normal. Minmatar, despite the awesome trailer that they just got, is, if I'm not mistaken, the least popular race in EVE Online. Most popular being Caldari. I think next is Amar, then Galente, or those two very close together. Could be the other way, and then Minmatar, the least popular one. It's actually the same thing, I think, with their ships. They've got some amazing ships, but most very niche, and as a result, it's likely that there's like a little bit less of a rush on Minmatar Tech 2 production than perhaps some of the others. And then we get a Mar with tungsten carbide that's just also moving sideways. Very interesting on this one as well. 186 for the sellers, 178 for the buyers. So a Mar Minmatar moving in a different pattern than Caldari and Galente. So far back in a normal range, you could say, for the year again as well, and then just stopping the descent. For the metamaterials, we've got photonic for Galente production. This one is continuing to move mostly sideways at their current ranges. 12,500, 12,640 for the sellers, 12,140 for the buyers, exactly for photonic metamaterials. Haven't moved that much despite all of the industry changes, resource scarcity and all of that stuff. Still very reasonable in price, I would say, looking at this 1-year chart. For Caldari, it's the non-linears jumping up a little bit more volatility here, up to 25,000 for the sellers, 23,000 for the buyers, which honestly is not out of line with what we've seen for the Tech 2 ships. The Caldari ones have been the kings of volatility in the last couple of months, and thus more expensive in the metamaterials. A bit more volatility here as well. At the moment, it should be very expensive to make those. Then we've got the Minmatar one, plasmonic metamaterials. Again, 20k, looking at this 1-year chart, coming from a crazy 50,000, but this is pretty stable at a normal price range. And then for Amar, we've got the terahertz ones, which again, a little bit of pressure, but coming from a high point of 20k, settling at 17.5. Pretty normal, pretty average again as well. Then for our other advanced materials, last week I think was dominated by pressure, just like with PI, not a lot of ISK flowing in. Let's see if there's a bit of buying happening, at least here in fermionic condensates. We get a little bit of buying on volumes. keeping the price in check from continuing to decline. But are we above 70k? No, 67,000 for the sellers, 61,000 for the buyers, getting down to 60 very quickly, showing a lack of demand. Sometimes maybe supply disruption or something like that can push the price back up, but right, the average for the year 75, 80k is nowhere near in sight. Then we got Ferrogel, still below 35,000. So I would say here again, below average. 35 for the sellers, 31 for the buyers, going down to 27 pretty quickly on the front page here as well. Fullerite, right, a little bit of a bounce, but that 20-day moving average, and you can see all of these averages continuing to just slowly pull towards 750, 787 to 652. Yep, and look at this again. So here is the supply, so we can keep scrolling and goes to 820 or something like that. So this is for a couple of pages, it's not even that much of a price difference. And then here are the buyers, and that is it. So clearly oversupplied at the moment. Hypersynaptic fibers staying below 10,000 disc. I mean, here the story is going to be pretty much the same. You get a little bit of a bounce here for nano transistors back above 5,000 disc. That's perhaps not insignificant. 5.2 for the sellers, 4,800 for the buyers. This is actually historically like it's low end of the range. I think here we can still see that at the end of the chart here. We had like a very nice year where nano transistors were basically moving from 6,000 to 5,000. There's 6,000 when there was not enough supply. That's when the sellers went up there and managed to sell at that price, and they were constantly dominating that. And then on, a little bit of extra supply, we could go down towards 5,000 disc. We stayed there for a little bit, but then supply would dry up, get back to 6k for a while, and that cycle would continue very predictably, which made for trade opportunities. But eventually, right, that was broken. We went down to 4k, and now we are really struggling a little bit, I would say, to actually find that predictability in this market. So seeing this back above 5k is actually a very good price for nano transistors, but the upcoming weeks will show whether or not it can maintain that. Phenolic composites, more pressure, stopping the bleeding, but that's really it. And then ceramic fibers, also a little bit more pressure. So this here you can see as well a March boost for these last two, and same thing here in March. So this, I think, was like an announcement for industry. We need more of this stuff. It is an advanced move material, and for a while we managed to keep that premium, but this is clearly starting to erode slowly as we're heading for 400 on the ceramic fibers. And again, it's a lack of demand. These are all the buyers there are, whereas sellers are dominating that and pushing the prices back to their average for the year very slowly. We're still at a premium, but it is eroding quickly. Or quickly, no, slowly. It's slowly eroding. Then we've got the Tech 2 ships next. Let's take a look at those at 41.40. Like that. And for this one, I'm going to put up my active trades. I haven't done too much last week, but here we go. The Oneros, a little bit surprised by that, but it triggered, so I managed to buy an Oneros at 165 without taxes. And then the Kitsune, trying to sell for 30 million after taxes, which will not work out. Too much competition came in very quickly, but I'll quickly show you guys this chart though. So I was kind of hoping that we would be able to break up to 35, then I would have been able to make my sell. Unfortunately, new sellers came in, and so if we can get a double bounce, maybe it can still materialize. I'm gonna keep up my sell order. I mean, I was very aggressive. You can see that buy for 20.5, sell for 33 million. That's like the biggest margin, the biggest profit margin on a trade that I would have been able to realize, but so far that hasn't triggered yet. We'll see if I can get lucky. I'm keeping this sell order where it is for now. And yeah, the Oneros bought on more downwards pressure. That is what happened last week. So let's take a look at some of the other markets. Here is the Basilisk. I would say that for active traders, this is not what you want to see on the chart. We're basically staying above that 230 million mark and starting to move very sideways on 20 and 5-day moving average. 237 million for most sellers, 208 for most buyers, and then a couple coming in here at 220 is basically not the place where you want to buy or sell at the moment. So this is not the best chart. Before this, right, clear bottoms, very nice highs. Caldari ships, very nice volatility. Same thing with the Cerberus, although it is landing on 230 million, which has been a trigger before this. I think this is a head and shoulders pattern, right? Here's the shoulder, here's a head up to 330, then another one. So on this bounce, I think I did make a trade. Do I have? No. But we saw the same thing in the Basilisk then. Was that the trade that I made? Yeah, well, it's not exactly as clear a head and shoulders pattern as that. But now we are actually seeing pressure, which to me is a surprise considering what we just saw in the advanced moon materials. So sellers are at 227, below 230, and buyers are coming in at 220 million, which is very aggressive, very narrow margin. I would say if we can get rid of these buyers, then buying a Cerberus does start to make a lot of sense on this pressure here. But does it have enough momentum? That's the real question. Something to keep an eye on though. If we can get rid of these two buy orders, then I do think you can grab a cheap Cerberus. Next up, we've got the Guardian, showing a little bit more volatility here as well. And do I have a Guardian trade or a Guardian? Yeah, I bought a Guardian, 185 million, 185.5 million pretty much. And currently they are selling for 220 million, almost 218. Buyers coming in at 187. So I could definitely take some profits right now by selling the Guardian on this upswing here as well. Next up, we've got the Hound that is, well, finally pushing back down, touching 25 million. We've been here before, so we are talking 24 million for the first seller, 26 for most, and then 24 million for the buyers. Unfortunately, still very aggressive buyers as well, but that's really the choice that you have to make then. 117, that's definitely a lot, so I would say I'm going to have more patience, because this should really keep the price from bouncing anywhere, and then a little bit of a rush of supply that's more than this, right, then in the 24 hours is eventually going to erode these buyers and could put buyers closer to 20 million. That's where I would jump in on the Hound. So here it is developing, there is more supply, and these 117 are going to potentially create an oversupply situation. But again, I think we need a little bit more patience. I think we can basically break through that 25 million, and that's where we want to make a move if we can. Iquitursa landing on 700 million, at least that's a little bit of a lower price, 720 for the sellers, 650 for the buyers. I'm not sure if this is like trick activity or a little bit more availability, or if this is just a summer slump. It could definitely be that as well, but we're keeping an eye on this one for Triglavian availability and affordability. Next up, we've got the Ishtar that is now starting to move sideways again in a range where we don't want to sell or buy too often. 230 million for the first seller, 234 for most, 220 for the buyers. And then my Ishtar trades, well, I was already happy with a little bit of profit, 206 for buying, 221 for selling. So if you followed my buy when it happened, although I don't think I mentioned it in Eve Talk the week I did it, then you're looking at even more profits than me now. But yeah, for buying, definitely not the right price range. Anyone dropping off? Here's the Manticore, wants to, right, gets back below 30 million is that, which does make it pretty interesting. But where are those buyers? Still aggressive, right? 29 million for the sellers, but above 27 million for the buyers, which puts us on the chart right where we are. Now the potential does exist that this is a good jumping point for the Manticore as well, but if we look at what happened before the latest peaks, it was 25 million and below, and we're not there just yet. It is quite a few sell orders here, and we've got a 230 here and a 45 to keep us in check. So this again for me means I'm just gonna be patient. If someone brings like 30 or you know, if there's players that bring in another 30 Manticores, we could break down here on these buyers and eventually touch that 25 million again, which for now, for me, I already have some holdings. I'm definitely willing to wait that out. Then we've got the Munin below 200 million. So this one does look like an interesting spot. Yeah, 206 for the sellers, 183 million for the first buyer. Clear lack of demand. If you would want to invest in anything, I do think trying to buy a Munin at the moment makes sense. We stalled here just below 200 million, but we're continuing the downwards pressure. So on this chart, this is the time to jump in. You know, a buy order of like just above 183 can probably get you know, picked up very quickly, as long as you only do it with like one chip. If you try to buy a dozen of them, you're gonna spook the market. But I think one cheap Munin pickup is possible right now. Now, selling at a higher price is not that easy. You can see the volumes are pretty low, but this chart does, in my opinion, indicate your opportunity to buy very close to 180 million. And then maybe on some war stuff, you could potentially sell at a better price. Then we've got the Nemesis. Again, not what we want to see for the chart. Slow 20-day moving average pulling back up from 25 million. 27 for the sellers, 23 for the buyers. Way too narrow margin. We get a 126 here. So it's the same story with the other stealth bombers. We do have a couple of very big volumes that are keeping us in check, that are keeping us from bouncing up substantially. Unfortunately, the buyers are so aggressive that we're just not moving anywhere in the price, and I don't want to jump in just yet. This is the same story, right? If this drags on and within the next, I don't know, 10, 14, even 30 days, someone does bring in another 50 ships or something like that, then we could crash down on these buyers and get them below 20 million. That's when I would want to jump in. And this is potentially going to make that happen. So I think now for the stealth bombers, patience is the right way to go. Then we get the Oneros. We saw that from my purchase that finally triggered. So currently selling for 182, 183 million. Buyers down to 161. Very sharp decline. And this is a lot better, and apparently has enough momentum that I managed to buy this one. 165 million, that's including taxes, so that is still probably decently close to the current buy prices. And that is what I've been saying, when the downward trend has enough momentum, you can see that gap between 5 and 20-day moving average, both of them going at the nice same pace. That's when one of these buy orders can trigger and you can buy at the best prices, and then demand really drops off as well. And yeah, you have this gap already between sellers and buyers, and now if this would be the trigger to go back up, then we are looking at potentially another very nice trade for the Oneros. The Panther is right back at the 1.25 billion on the chart, 1.3 for the sellers, 1.1 for the buyers. Bit of a lack of demand, and so this really does tell that difference in story between PvP and PvE, which is great for traders, but not great if you're looking for those margins, consistent margins on production. So I'll quickly maybe go and take a look at that. If we go for like a golem, normally we should see that very nicely. So the golem received a buff, went from a 1.25 billion range to 2 billion range, and it is still there. 5 months later, almost 6 months later, we're still there. PvE ship, the premium remains because you've got a far more consistent demand. But for PvP, so then we're right back here to our Panther. We got the buff, we got a jump to the 1.75 to 2 billion range, but it's a far more niche activity, and there's also way more organization behind the groups that actually use the Panthers, that they can probably produce their own, and thus we do have this very sharp drop off. And for the Black Ops buff, that's not a sustained premium that will need to be paid. We're right back where we started. Then we've got the Purifier. All right, a stealth bomber that's dropping off. We're touching 25 million. Looking at this chart, this is pretty good. 26 million for the sellers. We get another 123 here. And unfortunately, there's still a couple of aggressive buyers, at least one here at 26 million. But I would say here, potentially, we can very soon buy below 25 million and perhaps even below 20 million. And this would, of course, be like a no-brain opportunity. So here's the lack of demand. Here's the big sell order that's keeping things in check. And now we do have these sellers that will eventually just dump this one. That's going to happen. Looking at these sell prices, right? Someone is going to dump this one, and then you can buy below 25 million, or Do you have the patience? We're seeing it in all the stealth bombers. Do you think that enough supply will come in the upcoming days and weeks to push us below 20 million? That would of course be very, very interesting. We'll see exactly what happens. Yeah, this may be another sign that we are in this speculative Tech 2 overproduction cycle, where players are currently just pumping out as much Tech 2 production as they can, expecting CCP to come in and to actually hit that one just like they did with Tech 1. That would explain all of these stealth bombers here as well, with the consistent supply, but there's enough aggressive buying at the moment to keep us from reaching like 1 year low points and very clear buy opportunities, but a little bit more momentum and it can definitely happen. Something that I'm going to keep a close eye on. Then we get the scimitar, another chart we don't want to see, back above 5-day moving average, back above 20 moving average, not breaking, clearly through the 200 million mark. 212 for the sellers, 186 for the buyers. You could try it. I would never risk more than one in that case, but again, on this chart it's going to be very difficult to grab a buy order if you're not aggressive. Then we've got the widow, slowly confirming that same thing. I mean, we'd need to see 125 to fully recover. Buyers are already at 1.3 billion, sellers at 1.4, bit more of a premium, but it is going back down quickly. And then finally, we've got the zealot that's actually at 200 to 230, sometimes at the high, sometimes at the low range. Buyers, sellers at 225 to 30, and then buyers at 191. Not a lot of them. So on a downwards, I think, which is happening right now, you could probably buy a zealot well below 200 million, but here again, just like with the Munin, the volumes are a worry. So for Tech 2 ships at the moment, well, I would say there are potentially in the stealth bombers, there's this clear pattern that could create a very nice buy opportunity on enough new supply, but I don't see that many buy opportunities right now. And these are my holdings. Yeah, we'll quickly cover these. So here's the Confessor, bought for 35, currently selling for 41.5. I'm basically hoping that we can get above 45 million again. So I'm willing to hold on to this one. Eventually that will happen, even if it means that, you know, there's got like a Nostic fleet buy or something like that. I do think it will happen. Then we get the Oneros, bought for 19.5, currently selling below that. So that's continued pressure. Basically, I bought too early, but we'll see. I do think the upwards potential exists on maybe even the right event or something like that. Then we get the Guardian. You saw that we could definitely monetize that trade right now. Potentially, you know, with enough patience and the right circumstances, a sell at 230 should be possible, but we're already looking at a nice profit right now. Whoops, excuse me. Then we've got my Manticore, bought for 27. Here we get that hesitation, and these are going to cause a little bit of a problem for me to really sell at a profit anytime soon. So rather than you know, try to sell right now or something like that, I'm gonna hold on to this Manticore and wait for the phase after the phase I talked about, and if we see that opportunity well below 25 million, I'll probably buy a second one for that price. But for now, yeah, Manticore, unfortunately it is stuck because of these. And I have one at 27, which is maybe a little bit too early or aggressive. Then we've got the Oneros that triggered at 165, currently 182, so could take a little bit of profit, but obviously I'm hoping for the chart to go back up. Prospect starting to wobble, so at least we're not continuing the decline, but yeah, bought for 21 after taxes, currently selling for just above 21, so no profits there either. And then I'll quickly show you guys the Kitsune. I think my sell prices is like the 34.8 or something like that to get to that after taxes. It's probably this one right here, 35 million round, which makes 33 million after taxes. And yeah, unfortunately, I mean, I was the best price at the time, but very quickly some more aggressive people came in, and we are going back down at the moment, or we're stopping our ascent, which is unfortunate, but I mean, you had to gamble it at some point to get a really nice trade. This would have been a really nice trade, and the more greedy you are, the harder it is to actually have your trade materialize. So I'm kind of hoping for a double spike eventually in the Kitsune. If that does not happen, well, then we will see. I'm gonna spend a little bit on this one, right? Trying to this seller actually costs you a little bit of ISK. I'm not sure if I can really calculate all of that, but I always try to be as correct as possible. We'll see how it works out. Next up, take 3 ships then, right? Let's maybe close all of these. So at the moment, yeah, I don't feel like I should invest that much right now. A little bit of patience is probably going to be my strategy. Let's move on to take 3 ships at 58.50. Like that. As always, we start with the destroyers. Here's the Confessor. We saw that slow landing on 40 million, 41.5 for the sellers, 38 million for the buyers. Pretty narrow margin. Supply wise, last 24 hours we've got basically half a page, almost 12s, below 10s. This is pretty decently normal supply, and actually at, in my opinion, a slightly depressed price. I would have loved to see it a little bit higher, but this feels in line with potentially just moving sideways. Then we've got the Hecate that is also starting to get back to 40 million ISK, 46 for the sellers, 43 million for the buyers. And here we see more than half a page of supply, but again 18, 11 below 10. Nothing that should create like a price shock or anything like that, or suck up a lot of demand. It is at a slight premium over the Confessor, but we're also seeing more supply than for the Confessor. Then we've got the Jackdaw that went down maybe a little bit too aggressively to 40 million, does a little bit of a bounce, but stays below 45. 43 million for the sellers, 40 million for the buyers. And this again here in the last 24 hours, we still have like 15 of them that are being brought in, another 4 here. So there's again still a little bit of supply. The price is lower than the Hecate, but so is the supply. But overall, this again 10, 18, 10, and then a lot of them below is going to keep us in check, and I don't expect any big moves here. Then we've got this Vapel that did know that big buy volume and a price jump above 50 million ISK, and yeah, 51 for the sellers, 45 million for the buyers, and it is starting to drive demand. So here last 24 hours pretty much a full front page, 30, 11, 11. So this is not outlandish in how many there are. But to see this Vapel be the most expensive is a very unique situation. It should drive a little bit of demand, so I'm kind of hoping that this will give the Confessor a little bit of breathing room to catch up to the Hecate and the Jackdaw, and thus for me to be able to materialize my trade on that one. But apparently we'll need a little bit of patience, because overall the Tick 3 market is actually supplied enough in general that price moves are surprisingly slow. So this Confessor bump here is being absorbed surprisingly slowly. If we look at what happened before here, for instance, right, recovery very quick, recovery very quick. If we look, for instance, in the Jackdaw, definitely lately very quick moves as well, quite often. So here I'm a little bit surprised at basically the inelasticity of supply compared to the price changes in these ships, and that's not good for someone that's looking to flip ships, buy low, sell high. We need a little bit more patience on this one as well. And then from the ticker, you already saw Tech 3 cruisers may be in for higher prices. That's exactly what's happening. Here's the Legion, 223 for the sellers, 203 for the buyers. This is going to be CCP again. With CCP letting go of the skill point cost when you lose a Tech 3 cruiser. This is of course going to make them more popular, and the market is getting ready for that. I think it was basically announced again in like a news article, which I think is explaining the double jump. Loki was going down to 200 million, but now is back up to 233 for the sellers, 200 million for the buyers. Then we get the Proteus flat above 200 million. selling at 211, and then the gains here are for the Tengu that breaks out to 230. Yeah, 237 in fact for the sellers now, 186 for the buyers. That's a very, very big margin. So I'm seeing that the buyers are clearly hesitating at the moment. We will see, of course, but this should drive activity and popularity for the Tech 3 ships. All of this is of course speculation on that hitting the TQ, and then it's demand actually increasing substantially. And then finally we've got the extra product for the week, and I wrote down some salvage, so it's already quite late, but we'll keep going a little bit. 1 hour 3 minutes and 30 seconds. 1:03:30, like that. So manufacturing and research materials, and then we should have some salvaged materials. Just gonna do some regular ones, and we're gonna go over these pretty quickly, but we're gonna try to look at some trends. Alloyed titanium bar, a little bit of pressure actually here at the tail end, but still selling for 4K, so that is actually quite all right. Armor plates, that's not good news. 1 year low point, getting down to 25,000 ISK, so clearly being oversupplied at the moment. Artificial neural network, Tech 2 with the blue is doing okay. Then a bit of pressure on the broken transceiver, low end of its range. So I'm going to try to find the trend. Here is burnt logic circuits, very, very low, 1 year low point at 20K. Tech 2 is doing all right. This one definitely at the low end of as well, conductive polymer. So here we do have the industry rush that happened as well for salvage, but all of these have recovered, and some of them are actually at 1 year lows. Let's see if we can find some more contaminated nanite compounds, very common and very low. Current pump, Tech 2, so that one is doing all right. Damaged artificial, definitely at the low end of its range again. Current pump, a little bit of volatility, but at the moment, is it 5K? Yep, sellers 5, a couple of sellers, and buyers at 5,000. All right, drone transceivers, 1 year low point. Look at that drop off as well. Electromagnetic, so that's one of those new ones. Edencom related, I think. Low again, 1 year low points. So a bit of a breakdown in some of them. Quickly gonna go through these charts then. Let's just see if we can spot some more trends. Intact armor plates is for Tech 2. Actually was at a 1 year low point and is trying to move away from that. So definitely seeing some pressure basically in the market, with some exceptions. But even this one showing pressure at the end. Logic circuit should be, yeah, actually fully back to where we started off last year. So more pressure, low end. Just trying to get a feel of this. There are some exceptions. Nanite compounds, very expensive. Power circuits, pressure, but still doing okay. Power conduits, all right. And then Tech 1 is not doing great. So my read on this one is that the more common ones are struggling, and I think that is going to eventually be our new drones that are coming through, right? Even easier to salvage, and as the more common stuff like here, trip power circuits, I know that you get that just from going in an anomaly, blowing everything up and salvaging that. These are at 1 year low points, and then you probably have some exceptions, which apparently again to me is focused on Tech 2. That have you know, like some premiums and higher prices, and I do think if you like mostly get them out of like data relic sites in wormhole space and things like that, those have still have pretty strong prices. But yeah, anything that is salvaged from regular rats that are you know, available in anomalies and emissions and things like that are clearly not doing well. 1 year low point on all of those. And that could be, in my opinion, the impact of the new salvage drones that have made things even more efficient, which was basically what I was kind of looking at. And for Tech 2, let's see if I can like find something that's really clearly Tech 2 related that's doing well. Current pump here, for instance, again an April rush and actually continued premium higher activity after all of this. To me, another sign, I'm not exactly sure, but another sign that Tech 2 production is actually still at very high gears at the moment, in a very high gear. and that there's a hell of a lot of that is happening at the moment. Maybe even a little bit too much, which could be great for our stealth bombers. And that's going to be it for this EVE talk, guys. Thank you very much for watching, and as always, I'll see you next time.